Good evening. This is a practice presentation, a bit of a pilot project for a workshop series I've been working on about AI in education. Actually, that's not quite true. I thought that's what it was when I started writing it. But as I kept working on it, I realized it isn't really about AI. It's about teaching. AI just keeps lumbering into the conversation. And I think it's an important distinction because I don't think AI is the interesting part of the story. Teaching is the story. AI just happens to be the newest shiny object everyone is talking about. I'm Jason. I'm a chef and a culinary instructor. I'm not a computer scientist or an AI researcher. I spend my mornings, afternoons, and evenings in kitchens with students who are trying to make the transition from home cooks and line cooks into seasoned culinary professionals. And every few months, I find myself doing something that I think almost every educator can relate to, rebuilding the same things over and over and over again, updating PowerPoints, revisiting Canvas modules, fixing recipe packets and checking requisitions, modernizing assignments, tweaking quizzes, moving files around, searching for documents that I know I already made the last time I taught this module. Eventually, I stopped one day and asked myself a question. Not how can AI do this, but instead, why am I rebuilding this in the first place? That question changed everything because I realized I wasn't maintaining knowledge. I was maintaining manifestations of that knowledge. The recipes weren't changing, the PowerPoint was. The learning objectives weren't changing, but the Canvas page needed a revision. The reasoning wasn't changing. The formatting just left a little to be desired on modern technology. And suddenly, I wasn't thinking about AI anymore. I was thinking about architecture. Now, that might sound like a strange word for teaching, but hear me out. Architecture is really just the structure that helps good ideas survive. Think about how many handoffs happen in education. An idea becomes a lecture becomes slides, slides become an assignment, the assignment becomes feedback, feedback becomes learning, hopefully. But every one of those steps is a handoff. And every handoff is an opportunity for something important to get lost: context, intent, reasoning, professional judgment, the wealth of institutional knowledge, or simply losing contact with reality because we're spending all of our time maintaining the abstractions and the artifacts instead of the thing that those artifacts are trying to represent. When I started looking at my work in that way, I realized AI is never going to replace teachers or education, but it's going to help me understand what kind of architecture I need to build so that those handoffs become more faithful, less expensive, helping me translate between different systems, helping me move ideas from textbooks and cookbooks to lecture plans and handouts to production rubrics without losing the meaning or the context or the reasoning that gave rise to them in the first place. AI can help me spend less time copying and pasting electronic documents and cutting and taping physical ones and more time coaching. It's a completely different way to think about AI. This is the only diagram I'm going to show today. It's basically the mental map I carry around now. Let's use something simple as an example, like teaching students to make hollandaise sauce. The reality is the sauce itself. Did we make good hollandaise? Or didn't we? Experience is everything we've learned from making it hundreds of times, our successes and our failures, the little tricks that we pick up that never quite make it into the textbook. Reasoning is understanding why the sauce broke when it inevitably does, instead of simply knowing that it broke. Canonical knowledge is asking, what's the smallest amount of scaffolding we need to help this student succeed today, while also building a mental model for how emulsions work that they'll still have 5 years from now. And then comes the transformations. That same canonical knowledge now has to be transformed into a recipe, a lecture, slides, a cooking demonstration, a Canvas module, a requisition and purchasing guide for the storeroom, a grading rubric for the adjunct instructor, a packet to show them how to teach the class, a packet for the student that contains handouts and worksheets and recipes and instructions for how to do scaling, and maybe someday an AI tutor. They're all different views of exactly the same knowledge. And then come the handoff. Every time knowledge crosses one of those boundaries, from teacher to student, from recipe to lecture, from lecture to the Canvas module, from the Canvas module to the instructor's assessment, from human to AI and back again, there's an opportunity for meaning to get lost. And that's where architecture matters. And finally, we have the physical manifestations. Those are all the things we actually interact with every day, the printouts, the LMS, the chatbot, the grading forms. Those aren't the knowledge itself, they're expressions of the knowledge. What changed for me was realizing AI, it kind of belongs somewhere in the middle of all of it, not at the top and not at the bottom. Its job isn't to replace reasoning, it's to help knowledge move faithfully across all of those handoffs. And when I understood that, I stopped asking AI to create my curriculum. I started asking it to help me to translate my curriculum. That one shift changed almost everything about how I work. One thing I've started saying lately is this: AI is an accelerator, not an origin story. I love that sentence because it reminds me who's responsible for the thinking, not the software, but me. The AI helps me compare ideas. It helps me organize my thoughts and brainstorm and rewrite drafts. It helps me prototype new tools and new ecosystems. And it helps me discover research I didn't even know existed. So I don't have to reinvent wheels that somebody else has already figured out. But it isn't where my teaching is coming from. Teaching comes from working with students, from more than 20 years of working in kitchens, from making mistakes, making decisions, good and bad, and reviewing them, from watching what makes other people learn faster or remember more, and from watching them try to become better professionals and better teammates and hopefully better human beings. That's still where the interesting stuff happens. And honestly, I think we've been having the wrong conversation in education. People immediately jump to plagiarism or cheating, or whether students should be allowed to use AI in a given context. Those are important conversations, but I don't think they're the first conversations or the most interesting ones. I think the first conversation should be this: how do we model good intellectual habits? When I use AI, I'm constantly asking myself, where did this idea come from? Who deserves credit? Am I accidentally taking ownership of someone else's thinking, or letting the AI silently erase its sources or disguise its assumptions or confidently invent misinformation? What evidence supports my conclusion? What is my genuinely original synthesis or contribution to the question? How do I know this actually makes teaching better? How do we measure if the tools we use improve learning outcomes or simply generate more documents? That's what I hope students see. Not fear, not dependence, more like stewardship of information. Because education has always been about participating in a conversation that's much older than we are when we arrive to it. AI just makes that conversation easier to access. It doesn't erase everyone who came before us. Another thing AI has taught me is that there's a real difference between thinking and remembering. Remembering where a file lives is not teaching. Copying information from one system to another is not teaching. Reformatting the same information for 3 different platforms, that's not teaching. But those are opportunities to use AI to build better cognitive architecture. The more unnecessary mental load I remove from my workflow, the more room I have for curiosity, for mentoring, for conversations with colleagues, for watching students become professional. That's what I actually enjoy. One of my favorite tests for any new idea is something I call the Monday test. I can spend all weekend pontificating about architecture and philosophizing about systems and AI and curriculum and generating operations documents and lecture notes and PowerPoints and checklists. But Monday always gets the final vote. Reality always gets the final vote. Either we have the ingredients for the holidays when we need them, or we don't. Either the students produce the sauce successfully and on time, or they don't. Either the storeroom receives a requisition they can actually use, or they don't. Either the adjunct instructor walks into class feeling prepared, or they don't. If an idea makes Monday better, it stays. If it doesn't, back to the drawing board. I think that's healthy because reality is a wonderful editor. So, where does that leave us? Honestly, I'm optimistic. Not because I think AI is going to solve education, it won't. Teachers still matter. Relationships still matter. Judgment still matters. Curiosity still matters. But I do think AI gives us lots of opportunities to spend less time maintaining systems, less time scribbling, less time copying and pasting and reformatting, less time updating the same manifestations over and over and over again, and more time helping people grow. Maybe that's the real question, not what can AI do, but what kind of educator does AI allow me to become? For me, that's been the most interesting journey of all. Thanks for listening.